Hello and welcome back to another Rush Duel Links deck profile. Today we're taking a look at Celestial Guidance Warriors or Warrior Fusion or Yamitarasu, whatever we want to call it. So first things first, let's get into the skill Celestial Guidance. So this skill can be used if all the monsters in your constructed deck are light, dark, earth and or wind attribute warriors and or fairies. So this is very specific. And basically, this stops you from using like Siesta Torero, it stops you from using Shitotsu, it will stop you from using Burstinatrix. There aren't that many cards this actually locks you out of, but there are a few, and some of them are quite notable. I think one of the reasons they did this was to try and dissuade us from trying to play an elemental hero combined with kind of Yamitarasu deck. So that's my current working theory, but there might be something else. But multi-choice effect. Make up to 2 face-up monsters on your field with 0 attack, gain attack equal to the respective monster's defense plus 100 until the end of your opponent's next turn. Then you can set fusion from your deck or graveyard to your spell trap zone. So a couple of things about this. First off, we can use this to make 2 of our monsters that have 0 attack gain basically a bunch of attack. The primary targets of this are going to be either our Needlecree, which can go up to a 1500 attacker, or our Kime Luna, which can go up to 2600 attack, which is really cool. And there is some interesting things we can do with that with Shield and Sword and Sword and Shield, but we'll talk about those when we get to them. The other thing is that this is a lingering boost, which means it does last until the end of your opponent's turn, which is really, really good. Kime Luna's main weakness is it obviously has 0 attack. Now, typically the way we would use it is we would summon it out, use its effect, use its own effect to change it to defense mode, then have it as a 2500 defender, which is fine. But now, thanks to this skill, we can leave an attack as a 2600 attacker, which is really, really good. Now, the other part of this effect lets us set fusion from your deck or graveyard. So this is good because this means we only have to run 1 copy of fusion. We always have access to it. We can infinitely recycle it. But this is not as good as the other fusion skills that search fusion because this sets it straight to the field. So why is this worse? So first off, if we have an effect that discards cards, we could discard the fusion that we searched with the other skills. This sets it straight to the field, so we cannot do that. The other issue is that with the other skills, since we add it to our hand, we can set it in amongst a bunch of other back row, and our opponent isn't going to know exactly which one is the fusion. So if they have back row hate, they might accidentally snipe the fusion, and effectively you've wasted their back row hate. This skill forces it straight to the field, so they're always going to know exactly where it is, and they just know to avoid it with their back row hate. So the other effect is that we can make the original defense of 1 face-up monster on your opponent's field become 800 until the end of this turn. So this is a pretty good skill. We can basically use this in combination with Kime Luna and any other monster to out any monster, right? So we can change any of our opponent's monsters to defense as long as they're not a maximum monster because they can't be in defense mode, and then make it 800, attack over it with anything that has more than 800 attack. So that is pretty cool. But the primary use we've actually had for this is against this deck in the mirror. Because a lot of the time, for example, Yamitarasu oftentimes comes out in defense because it's got 3000 defense. Well, if they leave it in defense, we will just make it 800 attack over it. And same with Yamirula. Yamirula's effect changes it to defense, and we'll just make its defense 800 and attack over it. So it is a bit awkward how this skill sort of counters itself, but that's just part of learning the matchups, right? So I guess next we will talk about our boss monsters in the extra deck. So we'll start off with Yamitarasu, the Divine Ruler, and this is the card I think everyone was a little bit scared of. But it's made using Yamirula and Needlecree, the Celestial Seamstress. We can send the top card of a deck to the graveyard, and then either until the end of your opponent's next turn, while this card is face up against 500 attack, Needle Player can special summon level 9 or lower monsters in face up attack positions. They still can special summon them, but they have to come out in face up defense position. This seems better than it is, at least in the current meta, in my opinion. Against some decks, this is really, really strong. Against others, they always just seem to have a perfect way to out this, so it never actually feels that oppressive. So Metarion, for example, they tend to just go for a double fusion play. They'll make like a Vritra Star and an Ashura Star, just flip Yamitarasu face down, and then pop it with the Ashura Star. Sure, they have 2 2500 defense fusion monsters now stuck in defense mode, but Yamitarasu is dealt with just like that. So it never seems like it's that hard to deal with. Tribute to the Doomed also just gets rid of this. If we summon an attack, which we kind of want to, because it's got 3500 attack, and we want to put a clock on our opponent, we want to out some of their cards, TSA also will just weaken this down and let it be attacked over quite easily. Also, maximum monsters deal with this very, very easily. And then anything like a Seven's Robe Magician or a Mirror Innovator can just boost their attack high enough to attack over it. And that seems to be our experience. In our experience, Yamitarasu comes down, is kind of threatening for a turn, maybe 2, and gets outed very quickly and doesn't usually lead to our win condition. He's very, very rarely actually the reason we win games. He's more like a stepping stone we use to get to that stage. His other effect is that we can change the battle position of one monster. So again, we can change an attack position monster to defense mode to attack over it, or we can change a defense position monster to attack mode to get damage in. Then there is Kimitarasu, the Divine Luna, and this card is really, really good. The only negative about this card is it only has 2500 attack, which usually wouldn't be too much of a negative, but considering we can make Kime Luna gain 2600 attack, this is now weaker, so whenever we make this, we are losing quite a lot of attack, especially since we can use the skill twice. Needlecurry will also be a 1500, so effectively we're going to turn a 26 and a 15 into a 25, which does feel kind of bad. But multi-choice effect, we can add one monster with 0 attack from our graveyard to our hand. This can be pretty good to get back the Kime Luna if we need a follow-up play, if we want to make like a double fusion play, but more often than not, we'd get back Celestial Seamstress because it's just an extra body. But usually we're actually going to use the other effect, which is destroy up to 2 defense position monsters on your opponent's field, which again, the Kime Luna does set up because we can change 2 of our opponent's monsters to defense mode, then fuse into Kimitarasu, and then pop those monsters, which is really, really good. And this is unconditional destruction. Doesn't matter what level they are, as long as they are in defense mode, we can pop them. So we can change, for example, 2 Metarion fusions to defense, and then pop them with Kimitarasu. Then the final one in here is Crescent Moon Swordmaster. And this guy rarely comes up, but when he does, he can be pretty cool. The 2600 attack, made using Masaki, the legendary samurai and hero of the Yeast. The only reason we're actually playing this card is because we did swap over to a Star Restart build, and because we're on Star Restart, we wanted more normal monsters, so we did go for the Masaki and Hero of the Yeast package to kind of facilitate that, and Crescent Moon Swordsmaster, there's no reason not to run it, right? We can send the top card of it to the graveyard. This turn it can't be destroyed by your opponent's traps. Very niche effect, but oftentimes you just want them as a 2600 body. So let's go through the main deck. We have Kime Luna, the Dark Shifter. So 0 attack, 2500 defense. Change the battle position of up to 2 monsters on your opponent's field. If you change a battle position by this effect, you can change the battle position of 1 monster on your field. So one of the interesting little combos we can do with this is we can summon out Yami Ruler, the Dark Delayer, activate its effect, changing it to defense so your opponent cannot tribute summon monsters on the following turn. Then we can get out Dark Shifter, or if we already have Dark Shifter out, we use its effect to change 2 of our opponent's monsters' battle positions, and then we change our Yami Ruler back to attack mode so it isn't stuck in defense mode for the turn, which is pretty cool. And there is a few other like niche things we can do with this, but for the most part, we'll be changing defense mode to attack mode, and then summoning out a Needlecurry, boosting their attack to 26 and 15 respectively, and then attacking over 2 monsters to get damage in, or we'll be fusing them off into Kimitarasu and just popping 2 defense position monsters, both of which are pretty good. Now, one thing I will say is quite often we do actually choose not to go into the fusion, because just having a 2600 attack Kime Luna and a 1500 attack Seamstress can sometimes be a lot better than just having the Kimitarasu. It kind of depends on the amount of resources you've got and what you're expecting your opponent to do on the following turn. For example, if we think our opponent is going to swarm the board with Secret Order, realistically having more bodies, and especially quite big bodies, is going to be more beneficial than fusing down into just a 2500 guy that's going to get beaten over. The next card is Yami Ruler, the Dark Delayer, and Yami Ruler is Yami Ruler. 2500 attack, 2500 defense, basically fine. The effect to stop tribute summons coming out can be relevant, but we are in a very special summon meta, so it doesn't come up too much. But like we say, it can be relevant. If we can get a Yamitarasu and a Yami Ruler out, it's quite a funny little lock, because it means your opponent basically can't out anything, which is pretty cool. But there's not really much to say about Yami Ruler. He stops your opponent tribute summoning, he's got really nice stats, that's about it. And then we've got All-Seeing Harvey, and Harvey is still a really strong card. First off, it has really good stats. 1300 attack, 1000 defense is great, especially considering Light Galaxies decks going around, so you want monsters ideally that have good attack and good defense, and Harvey does have both. During the main phase that you normal or special summon this card, we can look at one face down card in your opponent's field. If that card is a monster card with 1500 or more defense, you can destroy it. The popping monsters with this is good, but more often than not, we actually look at our opponent's back row so we kind of know what's there. Now, Harvey does lose value in this deck because we're not playing any back row hate, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but still being able to see what's there and play around it is still really good. And then there's Rising Light Angel Essel. So Essel is just good in here in general. Being able to special summon any of our bosses is obviously really, really good, especially since we are on 5 of them. But because of our skill, we're very limited in what we can actually play, and Essel does fit into the criteria that is allowed in this deck. Putting cards in the graveyard is also pretty good because we have Star Restart, so being able to get, for example, a Needlecurry out of the graveyard can be really, really strong. Then we have Piercing Samurai. Again, a really good card. Get damage in through defense position monsters. We can make monsters into defense by using Kimi Luna, then give Kimi Luna itself, who goes up to 2600 attack with the skill, the piercing, and attack over for tons of damage. So just a really good card. Piercing Samurai, basically, if you're playing warriors, you should be playing this card. And then we have Needle Curry. We've already spoken about it a bit, but this card can go up to 1500 attack, and a 1500, 1400 is pretty good stats, especially into, like we say, Light Galaxy. Then there's Masaki and Hero of the Yeast. So these cards are a little bit vulnerable because they have 0 defense, which means they can get punished by piercing quite a lot. And with Dragon Fusion as well as Light Galaxy going around that do prominently have a lot of piercing, they can feel a little bit awkward at times, but 1500 beaters still can be good. We still can clear. We can get some good damage in with Piercing Samurai. And like we said before, they do fuse into Crescent Moon Swordsmaster, which is okay. The primary reason we've actually got them in is, again, just so Starry Star has extra targets to get out in case our hand is all bricked up. We can get rid of one of our high-level monsters from our hand using the requirement of Starry Star that shuffles one back into the deck. And then we can just bring back a normal monster from the graveyard just as a body to be used as tribute fodder to get out one of our big monsters. So let's talk about our spells. And first up is our Legend Shield and Sword. So Shield and Sword is really good in this deck. And why is that? Well, because of the way our skill interacts with Kimi Luna, it's like it treats it as if she has a buff on her, giving her plus 2600 attack. So if we use Shield and Sword, Kimi Luna becomes 2500 original attack, and then still has that 2600 boost on it, becoming 5100 attack, which is really good. Now, the only downside of that is because it's a level 8 monster and we can't put that same kind of boost on Kimitarasu because its attack is too high, it means we can still get stopped by something like Buffered Slime. That is something to take note of, but it's really good. And we'll talk about the trap as well. Sword and Shield basically does the same thing. If we have our Kimi Luna out and our opponent attacks into us, our attack becomes 51, which is really big. And that's not even talking about Needle Curry, who does a similar thing, goes up to 2900 attack with both Sword and Shield and Sword. So just a really good combo, in my opinion. Realistically, if we were trying to min-max and we were trying to play the best version of this deck, we should probably replace this with Tribute to the Doomed. And that is just because this deck doesn't out-maximum super well. We probably as well should use a Talismanic Seal Array in here, but this was just kind of the day one deck that we've been experimenting with. But in our testing, we did run into a couple of players that did just drop an Igdrago on us on the very first turn, and we just didn't have an out. Technically, we could have drawn an out, but we would have needed to find Shield and Sword and Kimi Luna together in order to out it, which is not necessarily super easy. So Tribute to the Doom, probably the better card, but Shield and Sword is very fun, and actually not bad either. Then there's Starry Star. Again, we use this to fix our hand a lot of the time. One thing I did notice while playing this deck is we would just open so many boss monsters. We would have games where we would just open our hand and look at 2 or 3 boss monsters. There was one game we played where we just drew 4 boss monsters all in one turn. And we have been changing the ratios a bit. We actually did start out with 5, then we went down to 4, and now we've gone back up to 5. And I don't know which one I preferred the most. We did take this deck to a tournament with only 4 boss monsters in it. And during that tournament, we did brick on all spell traps, so we didn't have any monsters. We also bricked on too many high-level monsters, so we couldn't play the game. And we've also bricked on too many low-level monsters, where we went through something like 18 cards in our deck and just didn't find any of our bosses and just got beaten down very slowly. So we've actually managed to brick in every single way imaginable, which does make it difficult to work out the ideal ratios, because if we had been bricking in one way or another more than once, okay, that tells us useful information. If we brick in every different way, it becomes a lot harder to actually work out what's wrong with the deck. But Starry Star is absolutely fantastic. We basically use this to, again, fix our hand and to turbo out our fusions. If we get out Luna and we get out Yamitarasu, we're feeling in a pretty good spot. Then there's Fusion. We want to use our skill to keep recycling this, so we only need the 1 copy, so 1 copy is completely fine. Then we have Negate Attack. Again, the best legend in the game. I don't really think there's any argument for Trap Hole at the moment, not really. And Widespread is very volatile. Either Widespread is going to be absolutely incredible, potentially just win you the game on the spot, or it's going to be completely useless because your opponent's playing Secret Order and it just doesn't do anything into that. So I think Negate Attack is the safer option. Widespread is the high risk, high reward option that in the right situation will win you the game on the spot, but in the wrong situation is completely dead. Then there's Buffered Slime, which is very similar to Widespread in that against some decks, Buffered Slime is pretty useless. In other decks, it will absolutely save you. The way I look at it is, if Light Galaxy and Cyber Dragon are both performing quite well, I like to use Buffered Slime. If you're in a pure Metarion meta and you're only running into that one deck, you could probably drop Buffered Slime. And then the last card is Sword and Shield. We've already spoken about this quite a bit, but this is just such an amusing card to use when your opponent runs into you, and then you can just make your Kimi Luna become a 50-100 attack monster. It feels so good. There was one of our games where our opponent did something out their Dragia Star. They attacked into us, and bam, they immediately lost such a huge chunk of life points and their boss monster. So, what do we think of the deck? The deck it's fun to play. I think this deck is enjoyable. I will say, this deck does feel a little bit bricky. We don't have as many consistency tools as we would like. We don't have many ways to gain advantage with this deck, which does feel like it has a few shortcomings. It does feel a little bit like, if you just get a little bit lucky, if you just don't draw bad hands, if we just don't draw all of our tribute monsters all at once, the deck's pretty good. If we get a little bit unlucky, and we do see more than one of these boss monsters in the open, or at any point throughout the game really, it's very difficult to fix your hand. You always feel like you're playing from a bit of a deficit, so overall, I don't know if I could recommend this deck, but if you like the idea of it and the aesthetic or the playstyle really appeal to you, I think this is definitely a good one to pick up. We did take this to a tournament. We did make top 8, and all of our losses during that tournament were just to bricks. There wasn't like, oh, we got like super outplayed, or oh, this deck did something really, really powerful that we couldn't overcome. It was literally, I don't have any plays because my hand is full of boss monsters, or I don't have any plays because my hand is full of spell cards, or I don't have any plays because I don't have any boss monsters because they're all in my deck still. So there is something to be said for that. All of our losses on this deck have felt like it's because we drew really badly and not because the deck felt weak. But let's fire into some replays so I can show you what I've been talking about.
シュデュエル ラッシュデュエル